American universities have plunged into absolute chaos. The visuals on your screens are testimony to how American campuses have now turned into protest sites. The arrest of 108 Columbia University demonstrators has now led to what are being called solidarity protests at institutions like New York University, Yale, University of Illinois, University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Southern California. Violent scenes, police officers being called fascists, mass protesters calling for violence, all of this amid the Israel-Hamas war. Chants of free Palestine and students calling for death to Israel and death to America. Prime Minister Netanyahu has condemned these protests and expressed concern about the safety of Jews. Listen in.
What's happening on America's college campuses is horrific. Anti-Semitic mobs have taken over leading universities. They call for the annihilation of Israel. They attack Jewish students. They attack Jewish faculty. This is reminiscent of what happened in German universities in the 1930s. It's unconscionable. It has to be stopped. It has to be condemned, and condemned unequivocally.
Now, the escalating tensions have drawn attention to the broader issue of safety and freedom of expression on college campuses. Jewish students have reported feeling threatened and intimidated by the protests. The role of university leadership and the response from the law enforcement agencies remain under scrutiny. Meanwhile, the protests are eliciting response from across the world, including India, which has said that we're all judged by what we do at home and not what we say abroad.
We've seen reports or several reports on it and have been following related events. In every democracy, there has to be the right balance between freedom of expression, sense of responsibility and public safety and order. Democracies in particular should display this understanding in regard to other fellow democracies. After all, we are all judged by what we do at home and not what we say abroad. And as far as your question regarding Indian students is concerned, we are always in touch with Indian students, and as and when there are issues which have to be resolved, we'll look into it.
So not just is the world looking at the Biden administration's next step, it's also wondering how to deal with this dangerous mix of academics and geopolitics. Let's try and understand this with our guests tonight on the show. On the show, I'm joined by Pathikrit Pain. He's a geopolitical analyst. I'm also joined by Eitan Moore. He's the co-president at the MIT-Israel Alliance. Thank you very much. Good evening to both of you on Nation Tonight. Eitan, let me start with you first and try and understand the situation that's prevailing at American universities. How concerning is it, and what are the authorities doing about it?
So yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It's great to be with you here today. I think, so as a student at MIT, for the last 6 months, since October 7th, we've had a group on campus who's essentially sort of stated the messages of Hamas and some other terrorist organizations, whether that be advocating for violence against Israelis and Jews, calling for an intifada, which is a violent revolution in Israel, and also, yeah, just calling for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea. Palestine will be Arab. So some extreme statements on that side, harassing Jewish students. So I think it's pretty concerning to have a segment of the student population at such an elite university that sort of states the messages of such an extreme group.
And does it scare students like you, the Jewish students there? I'm sure it's a bit of a challenge to actually be present amid these kind of protests.
Yeah, I think at a place like MIT, obviously the students come here to do science and not have to deal with intimidation and harassment. I know that there are definitely Jewish and Israeli students who have been feeling scared and intimidated. There was one Israeli student who was publicized on Twitter with a bounty put on his head. So yeah, there've definitely been instances of that. But I think like on a larger scale, it's just more concerning, at least for me, that you have like such a large segment that supports this type of rhetoric. And yeah.
Okay, Let me take this across to Pathikrit. We've talked about this earlier about how university campuses across the United States have been witnessing such protests, but now they're intensifying. Now they're becoming bigger, more aggressive, and more dangerous if we see that academics and geopolitics is mixing amid this war.
Sure. First of all, the chickens have come home to roost. United States have a habit of commenting and pontificating about what other countries should do in their universities and how to deal with them. Today, we are seeing that the Americans are using all these kind of tactics, using the riot gears and everything. Let me tell you, there is a strong stranglehold of the leftists and the Islamists in these campuses for a long period of time. It's not new. And these are not anti-war protests. These are protests which are pro-Palestine, which is fine, but these are also protests which are pro-Hamas and anti-Israel. And that's where the fine line has been breached. For a long period of time, this has been cultivated in the American universities, and the American governments, particularly the Democrats, have been okay with it. So I will not be surprised the same people, elements who have been involved in the Black Lives Movement or Black Lives Matters movement are also the ones who are doing it. Now, the predicament for Biden is this, that while this is going to cost him quite a bit, and he apprehends that when it comes to the election, and because most of these elements are otherwise Democrat voters, the predicament is this, that United States, it might sound as a dark humor, but United States can't help but to sustain a few wars, otherwise its economy will be challenged. So for the sake of sustenance of certain wars, they keep on funding. So this particular protest has a lot to do with this $95 billion, which has recently been cleared. And let me tell you, Shreya, this protest has nothing to do with Ukraine. That shows that this is not an anti-war movement going on. This is a particular kind of a movement being orchestrated for a particular purpose by certain elements which with deep ingrained hatred towards Israel. Had it been an anti-war movement, it should have been that both sides
But
should sit and
Pathikrit, at this point, let me
sides...
also bring in the fact that Israel is, as we speak, under pressure globally for its increased aggression. Yes, it has been fighting a war and all of that, but even domestically, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been facing that pressure to stop the war. So perhaps, what the students are protesting is more related to the kind of aggression and the intense fighting that's been going on, and calling for stopping the destruction that's been happening.
Shreya, you're absolutely right. That's what I'm saying, that if the movement has been about that both sides should shun violence, including Israel and its bombardment of Gaza, it would have made sense. But here, the elements are on one side saying that the government of the United States should stop funding the Israelis. Recently, the $26 billion was given. They're saying that, and at the same time, they're also supporting the destruction of Israel, which means that that's the reason I'm saying it is not an anti-war movement going on. I would always support an anti-war movement where you say both sides should shun violence and both sides are at fault. Now, if you draw fault with Israel, which is fine, you can do it as part of freedom of expression. But at the same time, you need to equally criticize Hamas and what happened on October 7. This war we have discussed in the past, Shreya. This war is becoming counterproductive, and even for ardent supporters of Israel, including India, it becomes very difficult to support something where you have completely devastated a region, and you don't know what would happen to those 1.5 million people. People, I mean, if Israel thinks that they will vanish one day, it's not going to happen. But there's a very strong difference between India's stand that both sides should shun violence and sit and talk and find solutions, vis-a-vis what the universities are doing, which is promoting and supporting one kind of violence and opposing another kind of violence, and saying to the American government that the universities of the United States, which have strong collaboration with this defense company, should stop. So it's a very, very finely orchestrated movement, which is not what it actually seems on the surface. So I think I am not in favor of war, but I think this is not just an anti-war movement, it is something else going on. Back to you.
Okay. Eitan, one, do you resonate with what Pathikrit is saying, that this is beyond the war, this is more of a political standing, this is more of hatred perhaps towards one side that is being, displayed there at the campuses? Also, there's been long discussion and debate about how a lot of these Ivy League colleges are hubs of leftist ideology, and academics has been dangerously and intensely mixed with geopolitics. And therefore, there is something that goes on beyond education at these universities as well.
So yeah, I actually completely agree with what was mentioned before, and I can give some evidence to that. This group, for example, supported what happened on October 7th explicitly. They justified it. On October 7th, 8th, and 9th, they held a celebration rally on October 9th, 2 days after. And a lot of their rhetoric hasn't been just against Israel and trying to stop their so-called aggression. It's been calling for violence against Israeli civilians and Jews. So I think that and we've also, like was mentioned before, seen the hypocrisy. There weren't really movements against the Russian aggression, against other various wars across the world. Nothing on this level of magnitude. And yeah, we saw a lot of Jew and Israel hatred before this war as well. But since the beginning and immediately after October 7th, we've definitely seen that. Yeah, and if it was just an anti-war movement, I would understand that, and I think a lot more people would be able to sympathize with that movement if they weren't calling for violence against Israeli civilians and celebrating the horrific actions of October the 7th. And yeah, you mentioned the sort of the leftist ideology that's been harboring at these universities. So yeah, I think it's really what's being seen is really what we've seen throughout the last 6 months is this really anti-Western, essentially anti-American, anti-Israel coalition that's really been apparent and been sort of fostering at some of these top universities for the last number of years. So you have a lot of these very, very progressive groups that are sort of coming together as a coalition, whether that be the Black Student Union and the Muslim Student Association, and even LGBTQ organizations, which is a pretty ridiculous coalition when you think about it on paper. But it's all of these groups that are very, very progressive, sometimes anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Israel, and even reaching anti-Semitic sometimes. But yeah.
Okay. Okay, Pathikrit, you wanted to make a point. Please go ahead.
Yes, Shreya, my concern is that many universities in India tend to look up to these American universities, which I think is a little problematic, because what is happening is that critical thinking and objective analysis is being replaced by, and it has been replaced by, everything seen through the prism of ideologies. So either you are this side or that side. That is the problem. We have seen that in case of India also. Every time India took action against terrorism, it was projected in a very different manner. They tend to side with the Pakistanis. That, I think, is problematic. Critical thinking is what the university should cultivate, but across the spectrum, from the teaching community to the leadership among the students to those who are sponsoring or funding the universities, it seems that a particular ideology is being pushed, and that is not what universities are supposed to do. They should teach and let the students develop their own perspective thinking, which is
I've
lacking
I've always had this thought that, where do you draw the line in universities? Where do you draw the line? Because we've got some of the greatest politicians and leaders from college politics, from universities, from student politics. Where do you draw the line between academics and politics and ideology?
If you look at the Indian traditional philosophies of the past, there was something called Shastrat. Both the sides, even if you are at loggerheads, you should come and debate and sort out. Unfortunately, that whole culture of debate is missing today. If you are a rabble rouser, you are taken up because you become the next big thing. And Greta Thunberg becomes a climate activist because she shouts. Nobody cares to see what actually she has done. She has actually done nothing. So frankly speaking, yes, it is a difficult situation. It is difficult to draw a line, but I think I find it, I have seen many of these students, some coming from abroad. You talk to them for 3-4 minutes, you see that they're hollow. There is no, what they believe in is not backed by competent ideology or critical analysis. It is just that they believe it, and if you don't agree to what they're saying, then you are a fascist. That culture has been created by the universities. We have seen in India also. That is not helping the world. It is only creating hatred. It is only creating divisions.
Okay.
It is not helping in merging both sides into a better world, to create a better world. And that's why you see conflicts are not ending.
Okay. Okay.
Back
Ethan,
to you.
let me ask you this then. How do you plan to deal with this? The kind of chaos and violence that we're seeing on American campuses, students like yourselves, the Jewish population there in United States. What would be your move forward now?
Yeah, I do agree with the recent. I just want to speak to some of the recent comments. I
Sure.
do generally agree. I would like to say that at least at MIT, um, I do think most of the students aren't activists, and most don't care too much or are even sympathetic with Israel. So I do think it is still a very loud minority. But yeah, regarding your question, so since October 7th, the Jewish and Israeli communities have really come together at MIT. We hold lunches twice a week together. So really getting to know each other, the undergrads, graduate students, the faculty. So really come together as a community, supporting one another, holding educational events and speakers. But yeah, hopefully when this finishes, we'll be able to bring bring education, independent education, speakers, and programming, and really show Israel in the good light that it is. I'm Israeli. I come from there, and I know how amazing of a place it is, and how amazing the people are. And I just really want to show that, especially after this all finishes.
Sure. Okay, before I wrap this up, Pathikrit, my last question to you is about India's response today regarding this situation. And it's been very interesting, it's been very clever, it's been very clean as to how India wants to respond. Quote unquote, we are all judged by what we do at home and not what we say abroad. Interesting response there, considering the past statements that the United States has made on domestic Indian situations.
Absolutely right, Shreya, and I strongly support the statement because for a long time we have seen the West, particularly the United States, have used think tanks and certain reports which are convoluted, which are has a deliberate motive to pin down even their own allies, and that is what they've done with India on several occasions. And that's where I think the hypocrisy is being exposed. Look at what the American reportage has been towards during the anti-CA protest or anti-farm law protest in India, and look at what the Americans themselves are doing in the universities. If you believe in freedom of expression, why do you ask the NYPD to go there and actually assault the students? Then let's have the same benchmark. And at the same time, Shreya, the irony is, while the Americans talk about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, in the whole of United States and Europe, Russia today as a channel is banned, and there are certain other publications of Russia is banned, which means they don't want one side of the story to come up. I did a program in YouTube or something concerning the American, the Russian terror attack in Russia. It was blocked. So I think there is. If the moment the Islamists do something, the leftists do something, it gets more focus from the media in the West. So I think there has to be balance. If you expect the developing countries and emerging countries to have one specific standard, please maintain the standard in your own country. You can't talk somebody else is doing a genocide when you are also funding $95 billion to continue the wars elsewhere.
Yeah, so we'll have to see, of course, Pathikrit, how Joe Biden responds to this, considering also the fact that this is an election year for him. But we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Eitan Moore and Pathikrit Payne, both of you gentlemen, for joining us on Nation Tonight and sharing your perspective on this very concerning situation across university campuses in America. Thank you very much.